Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our second edition of Maamar Mondays. This is our opportunity to study an original Chasidic discourse on the holiday of Passover, related to the holiday of Passover, and also related to the month that we find ourselves in, the month of Nisan. Now, we actually just started the month of Nisan a few days ago. Sorry? You lost me? You still have me? Am I still there?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah. So we just jumped into the month of Nisan a few days ago. Today is the 5th day of Nisan, and it's appropriate to explore the theme. So last week we opened up with the verse in the Torah that talks about the status of the month that we find ourselves in currently. The Torah calls it the first month and the first of the months of the year. And we asked the question, why the repetition? Why is it called both the first month and the first of the months of the year? It seems to be saying the same thing. The conclusion that we came to was that there are two different agendas, or two different levels, two different dimensions. We have the notion of first of the months, and we have the notion of the first of the months of the year. So there, hey Jeff, good to see you.
How you doing, Rabbi?
Thank God, pretty good.
You too.
Awesome. So we have this notion of months, and we have the notion of months of the year. Two different realities, months and months of the year. And in both of these areas, the month of Nisan is month number 1. We pointed out the obvious question, or the obvious maybe elephant in the room. Maybe it's not an elephant, but it's the obvious reality, which is that we know that the month of Tishrei, when Rosh Hashanah is, we know that that is usually deemed as the first of the months of the year, because it's literally the first calendar month. It's the month of Rosh Hashanah. And yet, we call Tishrei in the Torah number 7, and Nisan is number 1, is the first month. So what's going on? We quoted a verse and its explanation, the verse that details the celebration at the dedication of the Beit HaMikdash with King Solomon, and it calls this month of it called the month of Tishrei, Sukkot, the 7th month, and it says it used to be called the first month, and now it's called the 7th month. Which again bolsters our question, and the question is, why and how did the months change from being the first month of the year as Tishrei to become the first month of the year Nisan, and now Tishrei is number 7? So really, essentially, all the questions boil down to this. What is the energy of Tishrei? What is the energy of Nisan? What is 1? What is 7? Why is Nisan the first of the month? And why is it the first of the months of the year? What does it all mean for us? And I'm telling you, the payoff is going to be huge. There's such a beautiful lesson here, which we will explore in a moment. Oh, I don't think I said hi to Dove. So hi, Dove. Good to see you as well. All right, good. So let's jump right now into the conversation of exploring this a little bit deeper. So also last week, we asked another question. And the question was, standing at Mount Sinai, God spoke to the Jewish people, and God introduced himself. And God says, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am the Lord your God. And then he gives his CV. You know what a CV is? A CV is what us Americans call a resume. So he gives his resume. And he says, you know who I am? I am the Lord your God. And you know what I did? Asher Hotzeisicha Me'eretz Mitzrayim. I am the one who took you out of the land of Egypt. And the question that the commentaries ask is, why in the world is God introducing himself and stating his accomplishment, his achievement as the one who took us out of Egypt, when he could have said that I'm the one who created heaven and earth? And which is a greater accomplishment? So as the Discourse continues to explain, certainly creation is a greater feat, a greater miracle than the miracles of the Exodus. Why do we say that? Because when it comes to creation, God created the universe out of nothing. Nothing was there that precipitated the universe. It wasn't like there were already atoms and DNA, and then God strung together existing genetic material to form a universe. No. God created everything, the entire soup of existence, out of nothing and nothingness. That's what we call yesh me'ayin, something from abject, absolute nothingness. That's what happened by creation. What happens by the Exodus? Something miraculous, but far less spectacular. What happens at the Exodus is that God takes a stick and turns it into a snake. That happened before. That was one of the miracles that Moses and Aaron did in front of Pharaoh to try to convince him to let them go even before the plagues began. All right, so it's a great miracle. You now have a snake. That might be helpful. Who knows? But it's not from nothing. You had a stick before. Now you have a snake. It's something from something. Or when the blood, yeah.
True, and I've read ahead because you're in Chayenu now.
Ooh, nice.
But
my kids pointed it out.
Is it not more relatable?
Yes.
That to say this is something you experience.
Yes. Yes.
That's why the introduction.
Yes.
Versus ex nihilo development is like, yeah, you're powerful, you're a big guy, but I can't relate to that.
What have you done for me lately? 100%.
But I can't relate to it because I didn't experience it. This I experienced personally.
Yes. Many commentaries say
you personally left Egypt.
Yeah, 100%. And many commentaries say exactly that. Many commentaries say that why does God introduce himself as the one that if you love the Exodus, you'll love God. Why? Because they knew the Exodus. They had gone through the Exodus. They were the slaves, and they were now free. So it was 100% on their level, relatable, accessible, relevant to them, and that time in that story. 100%, and that's what some commentators answer. That's what some commentators answer. However, we're going to take a different approach. And Shivim Panim LaTorah, Torah has 70 facets. So that's an answer, and that's a very solid answer. I don't think there are any holes in that answer, but we're going to explore from another perspective. And in order to get there, we have to first pose the question so that we can open the door to that answer. And so the question, again, just to reset the question, is why does God call himself the master of the Exodus? He's just a master of creation. Why? Because the Exodus, again, is something from something. Sticks to snakes, water to blood, flowing water to standing water. Yeah, pull it off. I mean, what? He could just make the Statue of Liberty disappear. No big deal. Especially when you have a rotating platform. And sorry for giving away the secret behind it.
He's a Yid, by the way. He's from my hometown.
I know. David Kopp, yeah. Kopper Fildelski was his original name. But anyway, so what's the bottom line? The bottom line is the miracles of the Exodus, they were great, but they were only something from something, and that pales in comparison to the miracles that are something from nothing. To take a stick and turn it into a snake is easier. Again, it's hard for all of us, right? You and I, but relative to God, it's easier to transform one thing into another than to create everything out of absolute nothingness. Now, I can't really say, I want to backpedal on that. I don't know if it's harder or easier. I use the word harder or easier. I can't actually say what's harder or easy for God. Let's assume that it's all the same. But at least to us, it's a greater, it wows the mind on an even deeper level to talk about something from nothing than something from something. So therefore, when God is speaking to us at Mount Sinai, notwithstanding the very accurate idea that Steve mentioned, that God is sharing something relatable, the question is still asked, why does God state something that seems to be simply less remarkable than what he could have said? So to understand this, we're going to explore another piece to the puzzle. And to do this, I'm going to start sharing my screen, and I'm going to open up chapter 3 of this text that we're studying, which is called, at least in the English, Creation and Redemption. Once again, as I mentioned last week, this is a Chasidic discourse authored in 1950. It's one of the first discourses that the previous Rabbi taught when he first moved to America. And by the way, it's known in the Chasidic tradition that those discourses, the discourses that the previous Rabbi shared when he first moved to America, they were the fundamental discourses that he wanted the Americans to hear. So this was the third discourse, and it's a seminal discourse because it talks about a lot of really important ideas. And again, when we come to the finish line next week, at the end of next week's session, which will be right before Passover, when we come to the end of it, I think you'll walk away just blown away with a very practical and powerful lesson. But we have to go through these beautiful ideas in order to really appreciate the punchline. So I want to begin with chapter 3, which explores the notion of creation. We're talking about creation. Let's talk about how it all happened. All right, the way we're going to do this is I'll read the English. We do have the Hebrew, but we'll do the English. I'll read it, and you can all follow along. And if at any point you have a question, you want to add something, you want to share something, just unmute yourself and feel free to ask. Okay, chapter 3. It is written, in the beginning, God, Elokim, created, etc. This is the first verse of the Torah, and it should be familiar to all of us. Now, the word for God, the name for God that's used here is specifically Elokim. It doesn't say in the beginning, Havaya, God's four-letter name. God's tetragrammaton, Yud Kei Vav Kei, created. No, it says Elokim created. Now, the mystics jump on this. In fact, even Rashi jumps on this. And Rashi explains that the name Elokim is related to God's Midat Hadin, God's attribute of justice or judgment. The name Yud Kei Vav Kei, the four-letter name of Hashem, connotes God's attribute of mercy or kindness. And Elokim connotes God's attribute of din, of justice or severity. The Kabbalists explain that what does this mean? Chesed is open. Chesed is a flow that's open. It's when you open the spigot and allow the water to flow. That's chesed. And what's gevura? Gevura is when you close it. Gevura is when you stop the flow. Open the flow is chesed. Close the flow is gevura. That's din. It's judgment. It's justice. It means it's severity. It's a limitation. How does God create the world? Through Elokim. Through the power of limitation. Why? Because guess what? The world that we live in, the universe in which we find ourselves, no matter how vast it is, no matter how vast the galaxies are, it's still limited. It's still ultimately finite. And because it's finite, it's created through the power of the name Elokim, the power of divine concealment, the power of divine justice, the power of limitation and contraction and measuring. Remember this simple idea. The name Havaya, God's four-letter name that we don't pronounce even as it's written, that connotes expansion, transcendence, infinite, unlimited flow, open flow, chesed. Elokim, containment, limitation, concealment, contraction, making it smaller, and making things finite. All right, chapter 3, once again, and it is written in the beginning, Elokim created, the creation of the worlds, and here we find worlds plural because as Kabbalah teaches, we have multiple worlds and multiple dimensions that exist simultaneously. So the creation of the worlds occurred through the divine name Elokim, which, as I mentioned a moment ago, is the attribute of judgment and tzimtzum. Tzimtzum is not at all Zoom. That's a different platform. Tzimtzum, I'm here all week. Tzimtzum is typically translated as contraction. It means making something smaller, putting restrictions on it. It's like, think of a camera. Think of an old school camera. And the aperture, right? When you take a picture, what happens? The aperture opens for a moment. It lets in the light. This is like, back in the day. I think even today, though, you still have to have some sort of mechanism that opens and closes. Maybe. Who knows? But certainly back in the day when you were exposing film, you had to open the aperture, and then it closes back down, and that stops the light. It creates an impression. The light creates an impression on the film, on the negative, and then it closes right up. So tzimtzum is the process of closing it up. So you have the expansiveness, and then it closes, and by closing, that's what creates something that's finite. Let's continue back inside. First paragraph right there, last sentence. For creation of worlds means that they should be independent and limited beings. In other words, what is creation? Creation means creating something finite, something limited, and something that appears independent. And that's really important. That word independent is really important because we feel independent. If there was a constant flow of light from above in an obvious way, we wouldn't feel independent. We would feel dependent. We would be like the ray of light that knows where it comes from. The fact that we feel independent, the fact that we can imagine that we are our own creators, the fact that we could say, that a person could say, I don't believe in God. There is no God. I don't believe in a creator. Everything just happened on its own. That's because of the concealment. That's because God, as the author, as the artist, as the creator, has concealed himself behind a veil, a thick veil. He wants us to find him, but that's the default status of creation, is concealment, tzimtzum, limitation. Let's continue. Before the creation of the worlds, everything was nullified to and unified in the ultimate sense with the infinite light. This is a truth that's taught in Kabbalah in many places, especially in the text of Avodas HaKodesh. It says that before creation, everything. Now, what was everything? Who knows? Whatever that was, it was all part of the infinite light. It was all nullified to and unified within. It was all subsumed within God's infinite light. There wasn't anything that was independent. There were not independent beings and not even limited beings. But when the idea arose in his will, when God decided essentially to create worlds, they became independent beings. God decides at some point, in a point before time, God decides to create this, and this happens. And limitation begins. The truth is, and here he gives a very important disclaimer, the truth is that even after the creation of worlds, there is nothing outside of his essence. In other words, even after creation, we are still subsumed within his essence. We're still part of God's infinite light. We're still part of God's mind, if you will. Nevertheless, so it arose in his mind that the world should be an entity that appears independent from him and that it should be limited. In other words, independence is not a reality, but it's the appearance. And guess what? In this world, appearances are essentially reality. Might as well be the same thing. Because if we think it is, then for us, it pretty much is. So in truth, from God's perspective, God sees us as nothing but beings or parts of him that are subsumed within him. That's how God sees us. But we see us as separate, independent beings that are limited and finite. And that's good enough to create independence, and that's good enough to create a world. A world that thinks it's a world is good enough to be a world for God's purpose of creation. The point is that all this happens through tzimtzum, through contraction, through concealment, through limitation of the original infinite light. And that basically is what Elokim, the name Elokim, connotes. And in order to describe the limits, the limitation of the universe, this discourse, this mystical text, cites the Talmud. Now, how do we understand the Talmud? I'll let you decide, but it's a very interesting piece of the Talmud. The Talmud discusses how long it would take to traverse from earth to heaven. If you were walking, I don't know, maybe they were basing this on, horsepower, like go riding on a horse. Probably walking, because that was it's a default way of transport. The question is it literal or is it figurative? Again, it's an interesting piece of Talmud, But the point of this, which we're about to read, is to just show that no matter how vast it is, it's still a limitation. There's still a containment here of how big the universe is. As the Talmud says, bottom paragraph on this page 48, from the earth to the first of the seven heavens, in other words, from the earth to the lowest of the heavens, is a 500-year journey. And I know what you're thinking. NASA says, hold my beer. I get it. 500 years, we got it. We've figured it out. We've taken care of it. Baruch Hashem, technology is fantastic. The Talmud is not saying it has to take 500 years. The Talmud is just saying if you're planning on creating a stepladder or a bridge to heaven and walking it, it might take about 500 years. The point is, it's very vast and it's very far. Let's continue. And the thickness of each heaven, top of page 50, that each heaven is a 500-year journey. So it talks about how the earth to heaven is 500 years. Each heaven itself is 500 years. Between the next heaven and the next heaven above it is 500 years. The next heaven itself is 500-year journey, etc., etc. Scaffolds. So you have this massive expanse of earth and heavens. And then it says, the Talmud continues, the feet of the Chayot angels are equal to all of them, and the lower parts of the legs of the Chayot angels are equal to all of them. This is how vast the angels are, because the foot of the Chayot angels are equal to the entire expanse, and the lower parts of the legs are also equal to all of them. And there's a fine. So the point is that the universe is big. The angels are even bigger. The sages also said an angel stands in a third of the world, which he says right here. There are two interpretations of the statement. One, an angel is the size of a third of the world, and two, the world is a third of the size of an angel. The bottom line is, however big the world is, angels are also massive, and they're very large. And the point is, we have this vast expanse of the universe and this vast expanse of the angels. But here's the kicker, and here's the point. We're going to go the other way now. Notwithstanding how big it is, there's still a measurement. There's still a limitation. It still exists within a box. It's 500-year journey, but not more. Right? The angels are a third of the world, or the world is a third of the angels, but not more than that. In other words, there is a beginning and an end to the expanse of creation. As he says in the next paragraph, in any event, although it is an immense measurement, it is also an immense limitation. Right? It's huge, but guess what? All that means is that you have a lot of area around it that demarcates where it ends. Because it does end. It is not infinite. So here he's drawing the line between, no pun intended or whatever, between two realities. There's a reality of the infinite light, the infinite expanse, which is unbounded, and then you have the finite realm of creation that is very much limited. So we start off with unlimited, and then we move to a space of limitation as God desires to create a universe, a world, realms, etc., that has limitation. Havaya, the name Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, the four-letter name of God, represents expanse, infinite, transcendence, that which is beyond limitation. And the name Elokim represents limitation that creates the worlds. And that's why, very simply, that's why the Kabbalists say, that's why the Torah begins with the name Elokim. Bereshit bara Elokim. By the way, this is something I like to point out all the time, and that is we have, as of 100, 150 years ago, there are these theories as to how the Bible got here. It's called the documentary hypothesis. And the documentary hypothesis hypothesizes that there were four authors that wrote the Old Testament. There is J, there is E, there is P, and there is D. And there's a fifth party, the editor, who took these four works and wove them together in what we call the Torah. And you know what one of the bases of this theory is, of this hypothesis is? The fact that the Torah uses different names of God. Because J and E, J is Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, like Je, right? I don't even want to say it. Like the witnesses, yeah? which is the English version of the four-letter name of God that we don't pronounce. So I don't even want to pronounce it even with a J. I hope you're with me so far, right? So that name, that's the J of the J-E-P-D. And the E is Elohim. And the P are the priests, Leviticus, and the D is Deuteronomy. But the point is, one of the foundations of this hypothesis is the fact that the Torah alternates between different names of God. You speak to a Kabbalist, and the Kabbalist will say, "Are you kidding me? Are you Meshuggah? You're telling me because the Torah uses different names of God, there has to be two authors? Are you kidding me? You don't think there's an intention here? Every time it uses the name Hashem, it means one thing, and Elohim is another thing. The fact that the Torah begins with the name Elohim doesn't mean that the E author wrote it. It means that the world is created in a limitation. And when you talk about God's infinite expression, when you talk about the miracles of the Torah, guess which name is used? The E. Sorry, the J. In other words, Havaya, Yud Kei Vav Kei. So Elohim is used to indicate din, limitation, justice, right? Severity in the box. And Hashem, Havaya, is used, expanse, transcendence, infinite. In fact, the name Havaya stands for Haya, Hoveh, V'yeh, past, present, future. God is beyond time. Guess what that means? Beyond limitation. Elohim is in the box. Havaya is out of the box. So listen, I have no problem with the hypotheses. It's fine. People have to publish papers. They have to make a living. I get it. It's fine. It's fine. You have to listen. What are you going to say? I believe in everything. Then you have nothing to say. So yeah, you're going to come up with an idea, a chap, a chiddush, something new that no one's ever thought of before. I get it. But if you look at it, you soon realize that there's a pattern. It's like, imagine you take a work of art and you say, yeah, Michelangelo, all the orange was painted by the O, and all the red by the R, and all the blue by the B. And then you had a guy who, whatever. I don't know how that would work, but you're with me on this. There's a pattern, there's a gorgeous pattern.
Yeah. Rabbi, how does it relate the different names to the prayer in the morning where, we implore you, it says, think of the letters, the combinations of the words that are different, like names of God, Hashem. Is this totally different than that?
No. Every time we say one of God's names, we're meant to meditate on the specific meaning of that name. By the way, in the morning blessings, we say, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu. You see what's happening there? The mystics explain. We say Baruch, which is typically translated as blessed, but Baruch means to bring down, to draw down. It's like a vat, like when you have a syringe and you pull it and you're drawing, you're like sucking, you're pulling something. So Baruch is about pulling into the world some cosmic energy. And first we say Baruch, so we're pulling down Atah, you, essence, because you is beyond even a name. When you say you, it's not even calling God by a name, it's addressing straight on. So we say Atah, you, which is the deepest. Hashem, Havaya, which is transcendence. Elokeinu, Elokim. Melech HaOlam, who created the world. So we're going down. We're pulling all the dimensions, and we're saying that all of those dimensions of divine realities should then be should be present in this experience for this blessing. So,
not to take your track, I meant the prayer. We implore you, guard us as the apple of your eye. That prayer. Different.
I don't remember which prayer that is, but here's the bottom line. If it has a name of God and there's a meditation, then that's what it's. You'll typically find the meditations very precisely associated with that specific name. So there are Havaya meditations, Elohim meditations, etc. Okay, so if you find it, hold it up to the screen and we can take a look-see. Now, in the meantime, let's jump back in. So he talked about just now the limitations of the universe. He says the same thing is true with the nature of the angels. This limitation is true back inside page 50. This limitation is true of the spiritual angels as well, who vary in their divine perception and their love and awe of the divine. In other words, not all angels are alike. There are different angels. The Seraphim, he say Kadosh, holy. The Ophanim say Baruch, blessed. Different angels. Seraphim angels, Ophanim angels, Chayas HaKodesh angels, all different types of angels. What does it mean that there are different types of angels? It means that there is definition, and definition means limitation. Again, here's a Kabbalistic truth or spiritual truth or a practical truth. When you have definition, you have limitation. Because when you tell me that a word means something, what you're telling me is that it means this and it does not mean something else. This is what it means, it doesn't mean otherwise. The same thing is true with angels. When you tell me that this angel represents this element, great, we've defined it, we've also limited it. At the same time that we have definition, we also have limitation. Definition is limitation, limitation is definition. Let's continue. 52 at the top, it is similarly written, he acts according to his will with the host of heaven. As it's explained, the divine worship of the heavenly angel, Michael, is with love, while the angel Gabriel's worship is with awe. So you have some angels that worship God with love, and some that worship God with awe. And the point is that they're different, and distinction is definition is limitation. And although they remain constantly within their mode of worship, this one with love and this one with awe, from which they do not detract and to which they do not add, nevertheless, each one possesses many spiritual camps which differ one from the other. In other words, within the camp of Michael, and within the camp of Gabriel, you have many different types of angels. The point is, the diversity of angels all speaks to definition and distinction, and thus limitation. For the truth is, 52, for the truth, a bottom paragraph, for the truth is that all of the angels are spiritual entities. It follows then that the distinction between them lies not in anything physical or spatial. It's not like an angel, although we said before that the angel is a third of the world, or the world is a third of it. It didn't live class focusing on that piece of Talmud. The point here is that the angels and other spiritual entities don't differ in size and shape, but they vary in their modalities of being and worshiping God, but in their varying modes of worship. Michael with love, Gabriel with awe. This distinction, as I mentioned before, this distinction constitutes limitation. Each one is limited in its mode of worship, and limitation is incomparable to the infinite light, which is unlimited. So the bottom line here is that before creation there was infinite light, and infinite light means infinite, transcendent, boundless, no distinctions, no definitions, no limitations, etc. And then God decided to create. And from that moment, you have, at least within our space, at least within our perception, you have now definition and limitation, and you have distinction. This one is this angel, and that one is that angel, and this world only goes up to this point, and this heaven to that point, and that heaven to the other point. You have all of these really vast systems and structures. All of them are limited, whereas before, i.e. beyond this, there is no limitation. Now, here is the key idea. This gets really Kabbalistic and really spectacular. The creation of the worlds, therefore, required at its root the attribute, sphira, of Malchut, kingship. Let me explain. The Kabbalists talk about 10 sphirot, 10 powers, 10 divine powers that God emanates to create the universe. When God decides to create the universe, God emanates 10 distinct powers with which to do so. Chachma, Bina, Dat, 3 intellectual powers, wisdom, understanding, knowledge, and 7 emotional. Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, Malchut. Malchut, which is kingship, is the lowest of these 10 sphirot. If you want, you can Google on the side. Don't worry, I won't dock points from your final grade. You can Google the 10 sphirot, and you can see the list, and you can see the definitions and the meanings, and it can be very complicated, and it can be very misleading when you read it in English. Whatever. You can even see depictions and images and triads and triangles and all these circles and all beautiful depictions. Here's the point. The lowest of the 10 is Malchut. And his point here is that the worlds emerge, definition emerges. A world that sees itself as separate emerges not from God's highest attribute, but from God's lowest. It's the lowest attribute that creates a world that that thinks of itself as an entity. This idea is expressed in the verse. This is from the Ashrei prayer from Psalm 145. Malchuscha, Malchus kol olamim. Your kingship, Malchus, is a kingship over all the worlds. What does that mean? I.e., that is, the creation of all worlds stems from the attribute of Malchut. Malchuscha, Malchutcha, your Malchut is the Malchut over all worlds. In other words, it's your Malchut that is the king, that is that which creates all of the worlds. We emanate from, i.e. the creator worlds emanate from Malchut. If you want to look at it this way, I'm looking around this room to see if I have anything that I could use to depict.
That Malchus is the captor of the next world down.
Yeah. I was actually just trying to depict that somehow. So you imagine you have, a realm. You have a realm. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with my hands, but I'm just doing something here. You have a realm. Let's look at it as a circle, right? A realm. Within this circle, you have higher levels and lower levels. The lowest of the level of that world is called Malchut. I'm kind of framing my head here, right? Malchut is the lowest level. It's the Malchut, the lowest level of that reality, that becomes the highest point of the next world down, of the next reality down. As David said, the lowest, the Malchut, becomes the Keter, the crown of the next world. Malchut, Melech, is king. Crown is the crown. So the lowest becomes the highest of the subsequent world. When the subsequent world looks up, what does it see? Malchut. When the subsequent reality looks up, what's its source, direct source? The lowest dimension of the previous reality, the Malchut. Huh? It's an apartment building. You look up, you see the other guy's floor. It's your ceiling, it's his floor. Right? So that's what's going on here. The floor, the lowest of the Sphirot, Malchut, becomes the ceiling to the next reality, the crown to the next reality. Let's continue. Oh, by the way, we're going to move this from a level of words and concepts to very pragmatic understanding of Malchut. It's breathtaking. The same idea is expressed in the phrase, you are the only one, the life of all the worlds, O King. Yachid, Chei, Ha'olamim, Melech. We say in the prayers, Yachid, you're the only one. Chei Ha'olamim, you're the life of the worlds, and probably life of the party. Melech, O King. To proceed from the infinite light, which is one and unique, to life from all the worlds, requires the attribute of King Malchut. Again, in the Hebrew it works so much better. Actually, let me pull up the Hebrew. You see that? 1, 2, 3, third paragraph right here. Maamar, as it says, Yachid, Chei, Ha'olamim, Melech. First you start off with Yachid, which is God's unity, pure unity. And then you go to Chei Ha'olamim, the life of the worlds. How do you do that? How do you go from God to the worlds? Melech, through Malchus, through Malchut. So, to go from God's pure unity, pure oneness, infinite, vast, beyond, unlimited, indescribable, infinite light. To go from that to having olamim, to having worlds, you have first Melech, you have first Malchut. Okay, so now let's explore what Malchut is. Okay, here we go. Malchut. Just as it exists in the supernal realms, in the cosmic reality, it exists within us as well. Why? Because we're created in the image of God. And what that means, according to the Kabbalists, is just like there are 10 Sphirot in the universe, there are 10 Kochot HaNefesh, 10 soul powers in our own souls. And those soul powers are exactly the same 10 as the ones that created the world. Chachma, Bina, Dat, 3 intellectual powers. We have the power of intellectual conception or creativity, the power of analytical thought, the power of focused thought. We have the power of chesed, love, gevura, restraint, Tiferet, which is compassion, Netzach, ambition, Hod, humility, Yesod, communication, and Malchut, the idea of leadership, royalty, or kingship. That's Malchut. Malchut is the lowest. But Malchut exists not only within God's toolbox, God also gave us a smaller toolbox, but also with the same tools, with the same 10 powers. And now we're going to look at the attributes as they exist within the soul to understand the way it works above. As King Solomon says, Mibsari echzeloka, from my soul, from my flesh, I will perceive God, i.e., that means, again, according to Kabbalah, when we look inside of ourselves at our soul powers, we can get a sense of what it is in the analog and the source above. Let's jump right in. Malchut, back inside the text. Malchut is distinct from all of the other supernal sphirot. It's not just the lowest, it's the black sheep of the family. It's very different than the other 9, and he explains why, using human terms. This can be understood through the metaphor of the attributes of the soul. In other words, like I just said a moment ago, let's look at the way they exist within the human being, and then we can understand the way they exist above. Take the attribute of chesed, kindness, for example. Its essence can exist even without a recipient of the kindness. You can feel kind and generous even without anyone around. One who is inherently a good person possesses goodness and kindness in his heart. And when someone is in need of his assistance, he gives them of his goodness and kindness. In other words, the goodness and the kindness is his. He already has it. He's already a good person. He's already a kind person. He's already a giving person even before he's giving. That's his nature. Then when the need arises, when someone knocks on his door, that's my miming, right? When somebody knocks on the door, he then responds with his chesed, with his kindness, the kindness that he already possessed within. Are you with me on this? Yeah? He already had it. He's now expressing it, but he already had it. Let's continue. He takes it a step further. Not only is a person who's kind already kind even before they do kindness to someone else, he says even the animation of the attribute of kindness can occur without the presence of beneficiary. Not only is the kindness in one's heart in a latent state, it can even come out without anyone else being there. For example, Abraham, our forefather, was constantly animated with kindness, such that when after his circumcision, God brought scorching heat upon the world so that Abraham would not be burdened with guests, Abraham was distressed because of the lack of travelers to invite to his tent. It wasn't just that he was kind, waiting for someone upon which to do kindness. He was pained by not being able to do kindness, which means that on some level, not only was he kind, his kindness was animated. It was alive. It was expressed on a certain level, even without someone upon which to express it. And therefore, because he had no one to actually deliver it to, it actually pained him. His distress was due to the fact that he was constantly animated with the quality of kindness. The same is true of all of the soul's attributes. The implementation of the attribute cannot take place without another being upon whom the attribute can be implemented and who will receive the effect of the feeling. Right? Abraham couldn't give a hot meal to no one. He had to have the three angels who appeared as men, stop at his door before he fed them to actually feed them. So you can't implement chesed. You can't implement kindness without another, but you can feel it, and you can be that person even without anybody else, as he says here. But the essence of the attribute, and even the animation of the attribute, can exist without a recipient of the attribute itself and its animation. Even without another human being present, you can still be kind-hearted, and you can still even feel kindness in an animated way, even without anybody actually being there. Now, this is true with all of the attributes. All of the 9 attributes, this is true, with one exception, and that is Malchut. Well, all of the 10 with one exception, and that is Malchut, the lowest. It's not just the lowest, it's, like I said before, the black sheep, i.e. it's different. But with Malchut, which is the power of exaltedness within the soul, Malchut is, let me explain Malchut. Malchut literally is translated as kingship. It might be translated as royalty or sovereignty or leadership. But in essence, what it means is exaltedness. It means being greater than. Malchut, which is the power of exaltedness within the soul, although it is only a power like the other soul, like the soul's other powers, i.e. it exists within the soul just as the other powers exist there, nevertheless, the essence of the attribute and power of exaltedness, as well as its animation, cannot exist without the presence of another human being. You will not have the quality of exaltedness, of a king, of kingship, without the presence of another human being. As he says, this can be empirically observed. If a person is in a barren desert without any other human present, he will not be animated by an element of exaltedness. This distinguishes the quality of exaltedness from the other attributes. Really important example that he just gave. Remember Tom Hanks on that island with Wilson? Yeah? He created a friend, but he didn't create a subject. And even if he did create a subject to which he was king, he wouldn't really be filled with a sense of kingship. He wouldn't really be filled with a sense of leadership. There's a certain feeling, and it's hard to explain, it's hard to describe, when a person is in a position of leadership. It's not about abuse of power, God forbid. It's not a dangerous or negative situation. It's a very, very positive feeling. It's a very positive emotion. And the emotion is a sense of leadership, a sense of responsibility, a sense of duty, a sense of, there's a lot of, it's a mixed bag, Malchut. Malchut is a very complex emotion. It's not a single emotion. It's kind of a complex suite of emotions. Think about how it feels like for a new parent to hold their child in their arms. Think about that. Think about that feeling. Think about the feeling of holding a newborn baby in your arms and knowing that this time it's not someone else's kid that you can soon, pass back to them and then go home and go out to a restaurant or go to a movie. This is your child and you're responsible and you're going to be the one to guide this person and to raise them to be a mensch, to survive and to thrive and to live and to grow and to become their own human being, to become their own mensch. And now you're in charge. You can't make that up. You can't fake that. You can't be that without that. Are you with me on that? You can't replicate that. You can't take a rock, put it down, paint a face on it, and feel the same way. You can say the same words, right? You can say the same words. I'm in charge, I'll take care of you, etc. But it's not going to stir that feeling inside of you that happens when it actually happens. The same thing is true with leadership. Like a king, we don't really have kings today, so it's hard to give this example, although back in the day this was an example that the Kabbalists used that was readily understood because many lived in nations where there were monarchies and there were kings. But a king, when they are coronated as a king, there's an actual shift, a paradigm shift that happens within the psyche of that human being. Within their psychological and emotional state, there's a shift that happens. There is a power within them that gets opened up, that was never opened up before. That's what we're calling Malchut. Malchut is a certain element, a certain power, a certain reality within a human being that gets unlocked when there are others that are now looking up to that person as a leader, as the one in charge, as the one in power. Not in a bad way, in a good way. But there's something that's triggered, something that's opened at that moment. You can't fake it. You can't replicate it. You can't set up, little Lego people. You can't put 100 pieces of Lego people on your desk and say, folks, I'm your ruler, I'm your king, I'm in charge. I mean, you can. Clearly you can. But even as you say that, that thing inside of you, that leadership potential, that thing that's ready to take charge and to lead and to grow, you're thinking about that whole psychological and emotional a wellspring that's waiting to be tapped into is not going to be tapped into any other way. It simply won't be tapped into without another human being looking up to you as a leader. That's what triggers it. That's why it's different than all of the other sefirot. Chesed, love and kindness, can be self-generated. I don't need anyone to feel generous. I can feel generous from today to tomorrow in my own home, in my own room, with no one around. I can feel generous and think about giving and feel like I've pretty much given and be kind-hearted without anyone around. Yeah, to actually give, I need someone around, but the emotion is there before. When it comes to Malchut, the emotion is not there before. Now, one second. The emotion is there, but it's in a different state of latency. It's in a different state of hiddenness than all of the other 9 powers. It's so locked down. It's so proprietarily locked down. It takes another human being to unlock it. Let's continue chapter 4. The powers and attributes of the soul. Oh, yeah. Dov, yeah.
Sorry, it's actually Peter. That was my son.
Oh, Peter, sorry. My bad.
That's all right. I think, I've done another discourse. I can't remember which one, but I think I talked about like 3 different levels where, thought, speech, action. Is that the same thing as like essence, animation? I forget what. What you were talking about in
No, the thought, speech, and
are totally different.
So, well, it's all related. The thought, speech, and action are the garments of the soul. So we're talking now about the soul, the identity of the soul powers, the 10 soul powers. Those soul powers can then affect how we think, how we speak, and how we act. So now, are these kind of like, they're different levels, but are they mirrored on some level? They are mirrored on some level. So there are mirrors that exist between all the levels, but fundamentally, what it says, and you probably were studying Tanya or something based on Tanya, where it talks about the garments of the soul, the levushay nefesh, thought, speech, and action. Those are garments of the soul, and we're talking now about the soul itself, i.e., we are talking about the garments. Sorry, just getting my. We're talking about the soul itself, not the garments. As he discusses in Tanya, it's the difference between, let's say, within the human example, the person and the clothes that they're wearing. There's the person themselves, like the body, and then there's the clothes. The clothes you can put on and take off. You can switch them around. You can choose not to wear them. You can choose which ones to wear, etc. So the same thing is true. Our thoughts. We can control what we're thinking about. We can control what we're speaking. We can control what we're doing. We can turn them on. We can turn them off at will. I mean, it's something that takes more work than other times, but the bottom line is we have the ability theoretically to control that. What we're talking about now is not the garments of the soul, but the soul itself. The soul powers themselves. We have different soul powers. In general, they're divided into 2. Intellectual soul powers and emotional soul powers. The intellectual soul powers are not the same as thought. That's the way you think, not what you're thinking. I'll give you an example. A squared plus 2. Yeah.
Are each soul power exhibited through the garments of the soul? Like each attribute.
Correct.
Expressed in 3 different ways.
That's how they're expressed. 100%.
So in chapter 3, the last what we were going over, when it talks about like animation, is animation action or is it completely separate?
Animation is still within. Implementation would be action, right? Where it talks about or speech, okay? Because you could share loving words to someone else, and that's also an expression of your chesed, of your love to another that actually affects the other and hits the other because they're hearing it. So it doesn't have to be action, it could also be speech. Those two levels, speech and action, would be the implementation. But even inside, the point is, you can feel kindness and you can be kind even without the implementation. Whereas when it comes to Malchut, Malchut requires a whole different level of access. To bring it out requires really digging deep to bring out that wellspring of Malchut. The point is, really where he's going with this all, is, sorry?
The king needs a kingdom.
As it says, exactly, as it says, Ein melech below am. There is no king without a people, without a nation. If you don't have a people, if you don't have a nation, and as is explained in Kabbalah, not animals, right? Not, can't be a tiger king, right? You can't be, sorry Joe, you can't, that's not what this is. For those that get it, you got it, right? But you can't, that's not what that is. You can't be a king over something else. I mean, you can call yourself, do whatever you want, but it's on an objective level, there's something that gets unleashed, in a good way, something that gets opened up when we're interacting with other human beings. So to move on to chapter 4, although we're at the time now, it's 8:30, so I'll give you a quick overview of chapter 4, and then next time we're going to pick it up. So just very quickly, chapter 4 talks about how every soul power exists in a latent state and in a revealed state, right? There's the way it's hidden and the way it's animated, the way it's opened up. And Malchut is the same. It exists in a latent state, and it exists in an animated state. But it differs fundamentally in its latency, because every other attribute exists in a latency that lends itself to animation, whereas Malchut exists in a latency that does not lend itself to animation. Let me give you an example, very quick example. A coal, a hot coal, a white hot coal on a barbecue grill. Yeah? You look at it, you don't see fire. You don't see, it's not like, no. It's just a coal, you don't see any fire. But touch it, don't touch it. But if you touched it, it's hot. Why? Because there's fire inside. So that's it's latent, it's on the inside, but inside it's hot, it's revealed on the inside. How do you bring it to the outside? Put a piece of paper there, and it'll go up in fire. Put a piece of kindling and you can create a bonfire from that. Malchut is different. Then you have like a flintstone. A flintstone. You take a stone and you drop it to the bottom of the ocean. And a year later you rescue it from the bottom of the ocean. And you dry it up and you take something sharp or two stones together and you create a spark and you create fire. The fire in the stone, the potential fire in the stone is there. The potential is there. But it's not hot. The stone is not hot. There's a difference of the fire in the coal and the fire in the stone. The fire in the coal is actually there in its heat. Although it's not on the outside, it's on the inside. It's there, it's open on the inside. Whereas the fire in the stone, on the inside, it's not open, it's closed on the inside. It can still come out, but it requires force to strike it. Malchut is like the flintstone. Every other sphera, every other soul power, koach hanefesh, is like the coal. Every other soul power, it's open, even in its hidden state, it's like the hot coal, it's ready to go. You just put something there, whoo, it catches. Malchut requires subjects, deference, coronations, right? It's not easy. It requires someone upon whom to lead or to be the melech, to be the king over. So what's the point? The point is that Malchut by its nature, and I'm going to start with this point next time, this is the final point I'll say, Malchut by its nature is not just the lowest. It's not just the most hidden or latent or not lending itself to revelation. Malchut is the most dependent on the other. All of the attributes are self-generating. Malchut is dependent on the other. And that's why when it comes to the supernal sphirot, which is the attribute, which is the sphera associated with the other, i.e. creation, Malchut. Malchut is always connected with the other. It doesn't exist without the other. You don't have Malchut. You're not a king without the other. You could be kind without another. You can't be a king without another. Malchut is dependent on the Zulas, on the other. Spiritually as well, supernally as well. God's attribute of Malchut is basically dependent on us. In other words, Malchut is all about someone else. God's chesed could have existed without a world. God's gvura could have existed without a world. God didn't need a world. But God can't have Malchut without a world. And so where do we come from? God's desire to be a king.
And it has to be renewed every year, which is amazing.
And we do that. We do that. Because Ein Melech B'lo Am, you can't be a king without a people. Without a people that want the king to be a king. Otherwise you're not a king, you're a dictator, and that's not the same thing.
Term limits.
Yeah, well, can't go too far with these discussions, right? We got to keep politics out of it. But the point is like this. The point is very simple. Very simple. Malchut is the lowest of the Sfirot. It's the closest to the other. All of the other Sfirot are self-contained. They're for themselves. You can have chesed in your own heart and you don't need anyone else. You can be generous in your own home and never see anybody and you feel good. You feel good about yourself. I'm a kind person. I'm a loving person. I don't have anyone around, but if I did, I'm a kind person, generous person. You don't need anyone else, but you can't have Malchut without someone else. You can't be a king without someone. You can't have that feeling of being a king without anybody else. And therefore, it's Malchut that necessitates creation or requires creation for it to exist. So God emanated Chesed, no creation. God emanated Gevura, nope. Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod. God animates Malchut. Malchut needs a trigger. Creation. You with me on this? You have to have a something else to have a Malchut. When Malchut kicks in, you have to have the next. Malchut is what triggers the next step. It's like the slinky. That when it gets to that last thing, it's going to bounce. No, mine always break. Mine always get twisted. The kids, it's a whole thing. You put it down, it goes like this sideways, and you're done. But theoretically, right, it's that point where you know that when it hits that point, it's going to the next level. Malchut is when it spins off. Malchut is like the Joey to the Friends. It's like the Frasier to the Cheers. Am I right here with the names? Frasier, yeah? Right? It's the spin-off. It's like once you hit Malchut, you know there needs to be something else. So we come from Malchut. We come from Malchut, which is the lowest. And that's creation. And this sets the stage to understanding why God introduces himself as the one who took us out of Egypt. Because creation happens through limitation.
Does it mean that it's the most deliberate? Not that it's just the lowest level, but to exist from all those levels of Tzimtzum, there has to be some deliberateness to get there.
Yes, and it needs something lower than itself. It needs something low, on a very simple level, on a definition level. Malchut, which means greater than, requires a then. That's it. If you define Malchut as higher than, you need then. Chesed is not more loving than. That's not what Chesed is. Chesed is love. Gvur is restraint. Malchut is higher than. You need a then. Not a van. That's a different episode. Yeah. Okay. So we're gonna end here. But again, I want to just tease next week, because next week we're going to put these pieces together. Because what we're saying here is that to create this world, this universe, with all of the limitation, it comes from the lowest of the sphere of Malchut. And to cause redemption, to bring about the Exodus, is blowing up limitation. It's going back to the infinite. I can't say too much more. I don't want to give too much away. But we can start getting a sense of...
You got to tell us something interesting about Yosef Marcus.
One second. I can't say... I'll get there in a second. I can't say too much, but let's just say that this is why God introduces himself as the one who took us out of Egypt. Because to create the world means profound limitation. But to take us out of Egypt is blowing the doors off of limitation. And that's the greatest. Okay, so that's it for today. Let me talk about Yosef Marcus. So this text, if I go back all the way to the beginning, this is the cover page. Okay, HaChodesh Zelachem Tavshin, 1940. Creation and Redemption. I might have said 1950 before. I apologize if I said the wrong decade. It's 1940 was this discourse. Creation and Redemption by Rabbi Yosef Schneerson, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, who passed away in 1950. Translation and annotation by Yosef Marcus. Additional annotation by me. So when I lived in New York, I used to work on publishing Chasidic discourses in English. Yosef Marcus is a good friend, and he and I worked together on several volumes of this series of discourses, and he now lives he's the Chabad rabbi in San Mateo in California. And he has Silicon Valley, Northern California. He's got the Google, and he's got the, Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem. So, and he's a tremendous scholar. In fact, if you go to Amazon or the publisher's website, Kahal Publication Society, and you're looking for a Haggadah or a Tehillim or a Pirkei Avot in English with explanations, you'll find that he's worked on all these volumes. I've worked together with him on several projects, including some of the aforementioned. He's a wonderful writer and a wonderful scholar, and also a nice guy, a real mensch. So,
thank you.
That's Yosef Marcus. Now you know.
Now we know.
I call him Yossi, but whatever. That's how we roll. All right. Well, great to see everybody. Same bad time, same bad channel. Next Monday night. I know it's kind of cutting it close to Passover, but that's okay. We live on the edge. And we'll finish it off. I don't know that we're able to do the whole thing inside. We'll read a little bit inside and also paraphrase a little bit. But I'm telling you, the big finish is really inspiring. So join me for the grand finale. Oh, and invite others. Tell folks about it. It's always good to have the more the merrier. It's always good to have company.
Nice hat.
Nice what?
Nice hat. You showed the previous Rebbe.
That's a picture.
That's a hat.
And a picture. Yeah. All the Chabad Rebbes wore those hats until our Rebbe.
Yeah.
He was considered modern. People were like, what? He's wearing like a fedora? Fedoras were in style then, in the 1940s, 1950s. Right? The Rebbe wore a fedora.
It feels like he's looking at Eliyahu's father saying, what are you taking my picture?
He was very intense. Very intense. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Good.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Pleasure. Great to see you all. Great to see you. David, Peter, Steve.
Everybody on the call.
Be well. Take care, everybody. Oh, a quick note about programming. Tomorrow day, 12 p.m., Power Parsha, 15-minute Parsha discussion. Tomorrow night, 8 p.m., 8 to 9, 1 hour-ish, 8 to 9, Talmud Tuesdays. Tractate Psachim, Passover in the Talmud. Join me, be there or be square. All right, that's it. That's all I got. Pleasure. Oh, who is that? Oh, Julie, Jerry. Oh, fantastic. Jeff, beautiful. Good. Julie, good to speak with you. I'm going to send you an email in a few minutes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, pleasure.
Your hands.
Yes.
Stay away from people.
Yes. I tell that to my kids all the time.
Yeah.
Joking. That was a joke. All right.